It was the threads that woke me. The sensation was immediate, a sharp, tactile dissonance that sliced through the sleep. The sheets against my skin, his skin, felt abrasive, foreign. The thread count was too high, a silky, suffocating texture that my awareness instantly rejected. The air in the room was wrong. It smelled of lavender and something stale like old books, but the scents didn't trigger the associated comfort of home. They were just data. The weight of the duvet was a specific, noted pressure, 10.5 togs perhaps, but it offered no warmth, only a clinical sense of being pinned down. I opened my eyes. The bedroom was dim, painted a soft eggshell blue that felt both intrusive and boring. A woman was breathing softly beside me in the king-sized bed. The sound was a rhythm, nothing more. It sparked no familiarity, no affection, no irritation. It was just a sound in a room I didn't know. This body's heart began to thud, a dull, panic drum against ribs that felt too wide. This was not a hangover. This was not amnesia. This was displacement. I slid out of the bed, careful not to wake the woman. My feet touched a plush wool rug, the fibers pricking at soles that felt new and used. I moved through the dark, my limbs responding with a sluggish, unfamiliar grace. I found the bathroom by logic, not memory. The light switch was exactly where a builder would have placed it. The light flickered on, buzzing with a faint 60-cycle hum. And there he was. The face in the mirror was Thomas Vance. I knew the name instantly, the information presented to me like a file opening in my mind. Age 42. Physicist. Married. No children. I registered the thin nose, the slightly receding hairline of dark brown hair, the intelligent, tired eyes that were now wide with a foreign terror. I stared. He stared back. There was no connection. It was a mask. A high-quality, biologically perfect mask, but a mask nonetheless. I recognized the face in the same way I might recognize a painting I had studied in a textbook. It was Tom. It was not me. The panic was a cold thing now, not hot. It was an analytical dread. I raised my right hand. The man in the mirror raised his. I touched the cheek. The skin was real, warm with blood, a faint roughness of morning stubble. But the sensation was distant, like touching something through a thick glove. I felt the pressure on my fingertips, but the corresponding sensation on my cheek felt external. I'm not Tom Vance. The thought was pure, clear, and absolute. So who or what, Ami? And where is he? I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. My gaze was clinical, searching for an error, a seam, a crack in the facade. The face was healthy if pale. And then I saw it. It wasn't on the face. It was at the back of the neck, just below the hairline, high on the vertebral column. I had to angle my head, craning to see it in the reflection. It was a scar. It was impossibly small, no larger than a pencil eraser. A perfect pinkish circle of newly healed tissue, as precise and deliberate as a surgical incision. It looked like a biopsy punch, but there was no memory of an accident, no recollection of a hospital visit, no lingering pain. I traced its outline with a finger. The skin was smooth, sealed. It was the only thing on this body that felt new. It felt like the entry point. I tried to remember. I closed my eyes, searching the vast, silent database of Tom Vance's mind. I could recall complex physics equations. I knew his wife's name was Elara. I knew his car was a blue sedan and his office was room 314 in the Oppenheimer building. I knew he preferred his coffee black. The data was all there, neatly cataloged. But when I tried to remember this wound, when I tried to remember yesterday or the day before, there was nothing. A void. A 48-hour black hole in an otherwise complete life. Tom? The voice shattered the silence. I flinched, my new heart jumping. I turned. The woman from the bed stood in the doorway, clutching a silk robe around herself. Elara. Her hair was a mess of blonde curls, and her eyes were heavy with sleep, but they sharpened instantly with concern. Are you okay? She asked. Her voice was warm, textured with a familiar affection that struck me as utterly alien. You were just standing there. I looked at her. Elara Vance. My wife. A stranger. My internal database supplied the appropriate emotional context. This was the person Tom Vance loved most. This was his partner, his confidant. My face was supposed to soften. I was supposed to reassure her. I was supposed to feel love. I felt nothing. Nothing but a cold, sharp, analytical curiosity. I had to fabricate a response, pulling the necessary words from Tom's lexicon. Fine, I said. The voice that came out was Tom's, a little rough with sleep, but it sounded hollow to my own ears. Just a bad dream. Go back to bed. She hesitated, her brow furrowing. She was perceptive. She could already sense it. The wrongness. The chill that had just entered her home. "You're sure?" she pressed, taking a half step toward me. I forced the muscles of the mask to smile. It felt like pulling levers. "I'm sure. I'll be right there." She nodded slowly, unconvinced, and retreated down the hallway. I watched her go, this woman whose life I had apparently stolen. The panic was gone, replaced by a dreadful, singular focus. I was an imposter in this skin. I was an invader. And someone had left the door open. Faking a life is a task of 1,000 tiny, exhausting performances. I returned to the bedroom. Elara was pretending to be asleep, her breathing too even, too controlled. I slid under the covers, lying rigid on his side of the bed, intensely aware of the alien space I occupied. The pillows smelled of her perfume and his sweat, a complex olfactory signature that meant intimacy. To me, it was just information, and it was overwhelming. I lay awake for hours, my eyes open in the dark, cataloging the sounds of the house. The hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the foundation, the soft click of the thermostat. I was a sentinel in a foreign outpost. Morning arrived as a gray, unwelcome light. Elara rose first, a practiced routine of quiet efficiency. I watched her through slitted eyes, memorizing. Shower. Dress. Coffee. I followed suit, a mirror image. The house, in daylight, was a museum dedicated to a man I had erased. Every surface was curated. Photographs lined the hallway, Tom and Elara on a beach, smiling, windswept. Tom receiving a framed certificate, looking proud. Tom and Elara with an older couple, all of them laughing over a dinner table. I studied the face in the photos. He smiled easily. His eyes crinkled. He looked soft, emotional, weak. I felt a faint, cold flicker of contempt, quickly suppressed. In the kitchen, my body moved with a disturbing, pre-programmed muscle memory. My hand went to a specific cabinet, bypassing two others, and retrieved a dark gray mug. It selected a specific blend of coffee. It operated the machine with an expertise I, the conscious observer, did not possess. I was a passenger in the driver's seat, my hands resting lightly on a wheel that was steering itself. "You've been quiet all morning," Elara said. She stood across the granite island, her own mug held in both hands. Her gaze was analytical now, the sleep softness gone. "Still thinking about that bad dream?" "Just processing," I replied. The word felt right. Vague but technical. A lot on my mind. "The project." I accessed the data files. "Project. University. Physics. Yes. The project. I thought you had your breakthrough last week." She smiled, a small tentative thing. "You were so excited, Tom. You said you were on the verge of silencing the static." A new data point. Silencing the static. It meant nothing to me. "It's complex," I managed. "The execution is proving delicate." She accepted this. The keys to his blue sedan were on a hook by the door, next to a wallet and a university ID. I picked them up. The leather of the wallet was worn to the shape of his pocket, but it felt like a foreign object in my hand. "Will you be home for dinner?" she asked. "I don't know." Her face fell just slightly. The database suggested I should walk over and kiss her. The required action felt repulsive, an act of profound dishonesty. I settled for a nod. "I'll text you." The drive to the university was a masterpiece of automated dissonance. My hands gripped the wheel, but my feet knew the precise pressure for the accelerator, my eyes scanning the familiar route without any conscious input. I was navigating a city I had never seen. I parked in a designated spot, Dr. T. Vance. Physics and resonance. The Oppenheimer building was old brick and new glass. I swiped the ID, the lock clicking open with a permissive thunk. Room 314 was at the end of a long, white corridor. His lap. It was not a large space, but it was dense. Servers hummed in cooled racks against one wall. An oscilloscope displayed a flat green line. But the centerpiece, occupying the entire back half of the room, was a custom-built apparatus. It looked like a modified MRI, but open air, with a complex, helmet-like cradle suspended in the center, bristling with sensors and polished copper coils. This was his work. My work. I sat at the desk. It was covered in printouts, pages filled with equations I understood perfectly. It was research into theoretical resonance, specifically the frequencies of neural pathways. Conscious resonance, the folder on the desk read. I powered on the computer. As I waited for it to boot, a young man in a lab coat, a research assistant the database supplied, Ben, knocked on the open door. "Morning, Dr. Vance." "Big day," he said, his voice bright. Ready to run the final simulation? After Tuesdays. Well, after Tuesday, I didn't know if you'd be in. Tuesday. The day the void began. What happened on Tuesday, Ben? I asked, keeping my tone level. Ben looked confused. What do you mean? I left. You sent that garbled email saying you needed 48 hours to integrate the findings and not to contact you. We all just assumed the breakthrough was bigger than you let on. You looked rattled. Document. I mean, more than usual. I said, bluffing. It was significant. So, are we running it? He asked, gesturing to the machine. Are we going to silence the static? There was again that phrase. No, I said, the decision forming with cold, instant clarity. Not yet. I need to review the source data. There may have been a calculation error. Ben frowned. An error? But you were so sure. You said it was perfect. Reviewing it is just good science, Ben, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Right. Of course. He backed away, unsettled. I'll be in the main lab if you need me. I turned back to the computer. The desktop was clean, organized. But I felt a pull, a flicker of the body's muscle memory. My fingers typed a password onto the login screen before my conscious mind had even processed the prompt. Elara __real. The desktop loaded. And I saw it. A single video file, sitting alone in a hidden directory. The file name was simple, Confession. My finger, the finger of this stolen hand, moved to the mouse. I clicked play. My cursor hovered over the file icon, a generic white rectangle labeled Confession. The word itself was a provocation. A confession implied guilt, a wrongdoing. It was not final, Sir Hypothesis Unraveling. It was a plea for absolution or a record of a crime. I hesitated. Watching it felt final, a door I couldn't unopen. Before I crossed that threshold, I needed more data. The body I inhabited was a crime scene, and the past 48 hours were the time of the murder. I needed to know what hadn't happened before I learned what did. I turned to the device in his pocket. The smartphone. It unlocked with his thumbprint, a haptic buzz of confirmation that felt violating. The home screen was mundane, email, messages, a weather app. I started with the call log. My last outgoing call was 3 days ago to Elara. Before that, a call to Ben. Before that, Dr. Alistair Reed. Then for the past 48 hours, nothing. A perfect clean void. No incoming calls missed, no outgoing calls made. I switched to text messages. The last one was from Elara 49 hours ago. Don't work too late. Love you. The original Tom had replied with a simple, you too. After that, silence. This new consciousness had not been sent a single message in 2 days. This implied that whoever knew Tom Vance expected him to be dark. My fingers, moving with that chilling, independent memory, opened the bank's app. Balance, healthy. Transaction history. A grocery store run 3 days ago, a utility bill paid 4 days ago. And then for the 48-hour void, nothing. No gas station stops. No morning coffee purchases. No withdrawals. No online transactions. I checked the personal and work email inboxes. The work email contained the last message he sent, the one Ben had mentioned. I found it in the sent folder. 2. Ben Carter subject. Integration. Ben, the resonance test was a success. The signal is cleaner than I could have imagined. I am initiating the 48-hour integration protocol. Do not contact me. Do not enter my lab. I need absolute zero-state observation. Dr. Vance. Zero-state observation. It was a physics term, but here it felt like a euphemism. I pulled up the phone's location history. For 3 years, it showed a predictable, boring triangle. Home. University. Grocery store. But 48 hours ago, at 3:17 p.m. on Tuesday, the GPS signal simply stopped. It had been manually disabled. It was powered back on at 3:19 p.m. yesterday from the location of home. This body had been taken somewhere, or had taken itself somewhere, outside its normal pattern, and had deliberately, methodically, erased its own digital footprint. This was not an abduction. This wasn't a drunken blackout. This was a procedure. A cold, sharp realization settled in my new mind. I wasn't an accidental tourist. I was a replacement part. Tom Vance hadn't been erased by some external force. He had meticulously, scientifically, surgically removed himself. He had silenced his own static. The scar on my neck throbbed, a dull, phantom ache. It was the period at the end of a sentence I hadn't read. The lab, which had felt like a stranger's office, now felt like a tomb. The humming servers were a graveyard choir. The complex machine in the corner was not a tool of discovery, it was the gallows. I was alone. I had no past, no future, only this stolen present. I was living in the house of a man who had committed the perfect suicide, leaving his body behind to answer for it. The panic I'd felt in the bathroom returned, but it was different. It was no longer the terror of displacement. It was the dawning horror of purpose. I was brought here for a reason. I was the cleaner signal. My gaze snapped back to the computer screen. The file confession was no longer a mystery. It was an instruction manual. It was a suicide note addressed to his successor. Tom's hand, closed the email. It closed the bank app. It closed the call logs. The cursor, steady and precise, moved across the screen. I double-clicked the file. A media player opened. A timeline appeared. And the face from the mirror, flickered onto the screen. It was Tom Vance. But it was not the tired, confused man I had seen this morning. This man was terrified. He was haggard, unshaven, and his eyes, my eyes, were wide with a brilliant, agonizing mania. He looked directly into the camera. He looked directly at me. "If you are seeing this," he whispered, his voice trembling, "then I am already gone. And you are the only one who can understand." The video flickered. The man on the screen, Dr. Thorne, the original Tom, was a wreck. He wasn't just tired, he was consumed. He was recording this in the same lab I was sitting in, but the timestamp in the corner showed it was 3 days ago in the dead of night. His skin was sallow, his hair matted. He hadn't slept in days. "If you are seeing this," he whispered, his voice cracking, "then I am already gone. And you are the only one who can understand." He laughed, a dry, terrible bark that sounded like grinding glass. Ironic, isn't it? The only person who can understand what I did is the thing I became. He leaned in, his eyes, my eyes, burning with a feverish intensity. "You're probably wondering what you are. You're probably scared, confused. Don't be. You are the cure. You are the result." He gestured wildly to the machine behind him, the resonance cradle. "They told me it was just theory. Conscious resonance. A fringe idea. That consciousness is just a signal. A wave function propagating through the biological medium." He tapped his own temple. "This. The meat. It's just an antenna. A receiver." I sat motionless, a perfect audience. The result was watching my own creation myth. "But what happens," he continued, his voice dropping, "when the antenna is dirty? Corroded? What happens when the signal itself gets distorted? When the broadcast is nothing but noise, pain, and static?" He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. When he looked up again, there were tears tracking through the grime on his cheeks. I watched this display of emotion with a cold, profound detachment. It was like watching a chemical reaction. Interesting but alien. "You don't know what it's like," he said, speaking to me, the clean signal. "The noise. That's what I called it. The constant pressure. The memories that don't fade. The anxieties that build and build until you can't breathe. The dread that wakes you up at 3 a.m. The endless, screaming, internal monologue of failure and fear. I can't turn it off. I tried everything. Therapy, medication, meditation, nothing. The static just gets louder." He stood abruptly and paced the small lab, a caged animal. "But my research was the key. I found it. A zero-point frequency. A signal so pure, so silent, it could resonate with a human mind and displace the original broadcast. A clean overwrite. A factory reset." He stopped, staring right at the lens again. "That's you," he whispered. "You are the zero-point signal. You are the Vanish. A consciousness without the baggage. A mind without the noise. You are the silent Vanish." His hands were gripping the arms of the desk chair. I was a blank slate, yes, but I was a blank slate inhabiting a life built on a lie. A life built on this man's profound, terrifying self-hatred. "I had to do it," he choked out. "Elara. God, Elara. She kept trying to fix me. She didn't understand. You can't fix a corrupted file. You have to delete it. She's the only thing that made me hesitate." He looked away, his resolve hardening. But the noise, it started to affect her. My darkness was leaking out. I was poisoning her with my own despair. This is a mercy. For both of us. She gets to keep the man she loves, or at least the body of the man. And I finally get silence. The word hung in the air. Silence. The very thing he craved, I now embodied. I was his escape and his prison. "You'll need to know where," he said, his tone shifting, becoming clinical again. the scientist returning to his notes. It's not just the machine. The procedure, it requires stabilization. A clean room. They've done it before. They know how to handle the integration. They call themselves the Quiet. He typed something. An address appeared on the screen, overlaid on his frantic face. 1104B North Halicon Street. 6th floor. A discreet, downtown address. Go there. Tell them signal 314 is stable. They'll guide you. He looked down, his composure crumbling for the last time. He was looking at a photograph on his desk, the one of him and Elara on the beach. He picked it up, his thumb stroking her smiling, laminated face. I'm sorry, Elara, he wept, the words thick and broken. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. More than you, more than he glanced at the camera, will ever be able to. I just want the noise to stop. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat in the humming silence of the lab for a long time. The confession was complete. It was not a plea. It was a suicide note and a last will and testament, bequeathing his entire life to me. I now had a name for what I was, the silent Vanish. I now had a name for my creators, the Quiet. And I had an address. A cold, clear purpose settled over me. This was not just a random event. This was a conspiracy. A conspiracy of willing self-erasure. Thorne was the victim, but he was also the willing accomplice. I stood up. I erased the video file permanently. I wiped the server logs. I shut down the computer. I looked at the complex, silent machine that had been my delivery system. I felt nothing. No pity for the man who was gone. No fear of the people I was about to meet. Just the clean, simple, logical desire to understand the mechanics of my own existence. I left the lab, locking the door behind me. I walked past Ben, who was scribbling on a whiteboard. Leaving already, Doc? He asked, surprised. I need to check on an external component, I said. I walked out of the university, got into Tom's car, and typed 1104B North Halicon Street into the GPS. The address, 1104B North Halicon Street, didn't exist according to the car's GPS. But 1104 did. It was a sleek, 20-story tower of black glass and brushed steel, a monument to anonymous corporate wealth. It had no name, only the polished silver numbers by the revolving door. I left the car in a subterranean garage, the air smelling of concrete and expensive exhaust. I took a silent, wood-paneled elevator to the 6th floor. When the doors opened, I was not in a hallway but in a reception area. It was not a clinic. It was a void. The walls were covered in dark gray acoustic paneling, swallowing all sound. The lighting was indirect, soft, emanating from recesses in the ceiling. There was no art on the walls, no magazines on the low, minimalist tables. Even the air seemed different, filtered, sterile, and still. The oppressive silence of the place was a physical weight. Behind a slab of white marble sat a receptionist. She was young, dressed in a simple, tailored gray suit. She looked up as I entered, her expression not one of greeting, but of simple acknowledgement. Her eyes were placid, calm, and utterly empty. "Good afternoon," she said. Her voice was a soft monotone, barely disturbing the quiet. "May I help you?" I didn't know what to say. Eris's video had told me what he was supposed to say, not what I was. I settled on the code. "I'm here to confirm that signal 314 is stable." The receptionist's gaze didn't flicker. She didn't consult a computer. She simply nodded as if I had just confirmed my shoe size. "We have been monitoring the integration," she said. "Dr. Thorne was a high-variance signal. We are pleased the transfer was successful." She stood, her movements economical and precise. "You are here for your 48-hour follow-up. Please come this way." She led me through a heavy, soundproof door into a corridor that was even quieter. The carpet was so thick my footsteps made no sound. I was walking through a sensory deprivation chamber designed as an office. She opened a door at the end of the hall. "The resonance chamber," she announced. It was the room from Eris's nightmares, refined and perfected. My lab at the university held the crude prototype. This was the final, commercial-grade product. The room was circular, softly lit. In the absolute center was a chair. It was less a chair and more a high-tech throne, molded from white composite material, reclining slightly. It was surrounded by a gleaming halo of polished copper coils and humming server racks, all recessed into the walls, their indicator lights blinking in silent, complex patterns. Suspended from the ceiling was the delivery mechanism, a helmet-like apparatus bristling with sensors, aimed not at the head, but at the precise spot on the nape of the neck. This was my birthplace. This is where the noise is archived, the receptionist explained, her voice as flat as the walls. And where the new clean signal is introduced. I walked toward the machine, an astronaut approaching the ship that brought him to this alien world. I felt a cold, magnetic pull. The procedure, I said, my voice sounding harsh and loud in the dead air. How does it work? Dr. Thorne perfected the theory, she said. We perfected the application. Consciousness is a wave. Some waves become corrupted. By pain, by trauma, by chemical imbalance. They generate static. She used Eris's word. That static is a quantifiable, destructive frequency. We simply filter it. She gestured to the chair. The patient sits. We amplify their native, corrupted signal. The apparatus archives it, stores the frequency on our servers. Then we introduce the Vanish. A zero-point signal. A new, uncorrupted wave function. That's you. The Vanish resonates with the biological anchor, and the transfer is complete. The old signal is gone, the new one is in place. I lifted my hand to the back of my neck, my fingers finding the small, perfectly round scar. The interface point, I whispered. The interface point, she confirmed without emotion. It is the most efficient conduit to the primary neural pathways. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. And there, just below her hairline, was the scar. Identical to mine. My blood ran cold, a physiological reaction that was fascinating to observe. You. I started. You're one too. We are all quiet here, she said as if stating the obvious. We are all recipients of the service. We are the ones who chose silence. We monitor the new integrations to ensure a smooth transition. A horrifying, large-scale realization was dawning. Eris Thorne wasn't a lone genius. He was a client. He had paid for this. This wasn't a desperate scientific experiment. It was a high-end, bespoke, spiritual lobotomy. How many? I asked. Silence is a popular commodity, signal 314, she said. The world is a very noisy place. She moved to a small stainless steel tray. On it was a single, sterile hypodermic needle. This is just a stabilization solution, she said, her voice reassuringly flat. It will help finalize the integration and dampen any residual static. The body's original chemistry can sometimes reject the new signal. This ensures harmony. I looked at the needle, then at her empty eyes, then at the chair that had erased a man. I was an imposter, a replacement, a clean signal. And these were the people who held my lease. No, I said. For the first time, her placid expression wavered. A microfraction of a frown. It is part of the procedure. It prevents complications. I am stable, I said, backing toward the door. I will not be dampened. I turned and walked out of the resonance chamber. I moved quickly down the silent corridor, the receptionist's quiet, insistent signal 314, echoing unanswered behind me. I stepped back into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I was alone again. I exhaled, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had been born in a sterile room, the product of a transaction. I was not an invader. I was a service. And as I exited the building onto the loud, chaotic, sun-drenched street, a new, chilling thought emerged. If this was a service, how many other clean signals were walking around? How many people in this crowd were, like me, just an echo in a stolen skin? I walked for blocks, aimlessly, my mind reeling. The oppressive, manufactured silence of the clinic had made the city street feel like a sensory assault. The rumble of a bus, the shrill cry of a siren, the overlapping chatter of a dozen phone conversations. It was a wall of noise, Eris's static. But to me it was just loud. It lacked the insidious, personal terror he had described. It was just disorganized data. I needed somewhere to process. I saw a cafe across the street, its windows steamed, offering a generic, beige anonymity. I crossed the street, the flow of pedestrians parting around me, and stepped inside. The cafe was loud, but with a different kind of noise. The hiss of an espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic on ceramic, the low murmur of conversation. I ordered a black coffee, the body's preference, and found a small table by the window. I sat. The hot, bitter liquid was a sharp, unpleasant sensation. I was a product. A zero-point signal, delivered via a surgical port in the back of my neck. I was not a person. I was a replacement part, installed by a corporation called The Quiet, at the request of the body's suicidal owner. My entire life, the 36 hours I had been awake, was a lie. Elara was not my wife. She was Eris Thorne's widow, and she just didn't know it yet. The lab was not my life's work, it was the workshop of the man I had supplanted. The receptionist's placid, empty eyes haunted me. We are all quiet here. They weren't just employees of a bizarre clinic, they were a collective, a hive. And I had just walked out of their follow-up, refusing their stabilization. I was an unverified, untagged product loose in the world. A flicker of something pricked at the edge of my awareness. It was the body's animal instinct, a primal sensation from the brainstem that I, the new consciousness, was only just learning to interpret. I was being watched. It wasn't a vague paranoia. It was a focused, directional pressure. I slowly lifted my head, my gaze scanning the cafe. No one was looking at me. A student typed on a laptop. 2 women laughed over pastries. A barista wiped down the counter. My eyes moved to the window across the street. There was a man standing at a bus stop. He was dressed in a nondescript brown trench coat, holding a briefcase. He was perfectly average. But he wasn't looking at the approaching bus. He wasn't checking his phone. He was staring directly at me through the cafe window. His gaze was not hostile. It was not curious. It was like the receptionist's, utterly vacant. It was a look of pure, unblinking acknowledgement. It was the look of a mirror recognizing its own reflection. I couldn't breathe. The body's automatic respiratory function seemed to have stalled. He was at least 50 yards away, yet the intensity of his stare felt like a physical touch. He watched me watch him. A minute passed. The bus he was supposedly waiting for arrived, hissed its brakes and opened its doors. He did not move. The doors closed and the bus pulled away, leaving him on the curb, his gaze still locked on mine. He knew. He had to be one of them. A member of the quiet. A watcher. Sent to monitor the high-variance signal that was Thorne. As if confirming my thought, the man slowly, deliberately, turned his head to the side, exposing the back of his neck. Even from this distance I could see it. Pale against his skin, just below the collar of his coat, the small, perfect, circular scar. My blood, which had run cold in the clinic, now felt like ice. The man turned his head back to face me. He saw the recognition in my eyes. He saw the new, dawning terror on this face. He lifted one hand, not to wave, but simply held it up, palm facing me. A gesture that meant, stay. Or wait. Or we see you. Then, with the same deliberate slowness, he lowered his hand, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered. I was not alone. I was known. I looked around the cafe again, my perspective completely shattered. The student on her laptop. The man reading the paper. The woman laughing. How many of them were like me? How many were quiet? Silence is a popular commodity, the receptionist had said. The city was not a collection of individuals. It was a grid, populated by the noisy and the silent. And I was a new, unknown variable, marked and monitored by the organization that had created me. I dropped a few of Eris's dollars on the table and left the coffee untouched. I had to get home. I had to get back to the one place that felt, no, not safe. Nowhere was safe. I had to get back to Elara. She was the only person in this entire terrifying city who didn't know the truth. She was the only one who still saw Thorne. And I realized with a new, sharp and deeply unsettling instinct that I needed her to keep seeing him. My survival depended on my ability to perform the role of the man I had erased. I drove home with a mechanical, terrifying precision. Every traffic law was obeyed. Every signal was used. My hands, Eris's hands, gripped the wheel at a perfect 10-2 position. I was an automaton processing a new, horrifying directive. Perform. My survival, my ability to exist outside the sterile walls of the quiet, depended on my ability to successfully impersonate the man I had replaced. The watcher's gaze had burned a hole in my confidence. I was being graded. When I entered the house, it was dark, save for a single light from the kitchen. Elara was sitting at the table, a bottle of wine, half empty, and a single glass in front of her. She wasn't drinking, she was just staring at it. "You're late," she said. Her voice was flat, lacking the warmth of the morning. It was brittle. "The project," I said, the lie feeling thick and clumsy in this new mouth. It required oversight. I placed the keys on the hook by the door. The sound of the metal on metal was shockingly loud in the quiet room. She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy. She had been crying. I registered this as a sign of emotional distress, a problem to be managed. "I made dinner," she said, gesturing to the stovetop. "Is your favorite cocoa vin?" I looked at the pot. The smell of wine and herbs filled the air. The internal database supplied the relevant file. Thorne loved this dish. It was a comfort food tied to memories of their honeymoon in France. To me, it was just a complex collection of scents. "I'm not hungry," I said. That was the mistake. Elara's head snapped up. Her expression, which had been one of dull grief, sharpened into something cold and focused. "You're not hungry," she repeated. Not a question. A statement. "You come home 6 hours late. You don't call. You smell clean like a hospital. And you're not hungry." "I ate at the lab," I fabricated. "No, you didn't," she whispered. "I called the lab, Tom. I called Ben looking for you. He said you'd left before noon looking strange. He said you asked him what happened on Tuesday." I stood motionless, my carefully constructed performance crumbling under the weight of a single panicked phone call. I had no protocol for this. "Elara." "Don't," she commanded, and the sharpness in her voice made me flinch, a visible, undeniable recoil. She saw it. Her eyes widened. "You did that this morning," she said, her voice trembling. "In the bathroom. I thought you were just startled. But you do it every time I get close. Like you've never been touched before." She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the tile. "I've been going out of my mind. I thought you were having a breakdown. I thought you were having an affair, that you were a different person." She let out a choked, hysterical laugh. "And then I went to your lab." "You shouldn't have done that," I said. It was a reflex, a statement of fact. Her presence would have contaminated the data. "Ben let me in," she said, ignoring me. He was worried too. "I was looking for anything. Pills. A bottle. A note. And I found your real notebooks." She wasn't talking about the video. I had deleted that. She was talking about the source material. The raw, frantic calculations. "I spent all afternoon reading them, Tom," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't understand the math, but I understand the words. Conscious resonance. Signal corruption. The internal static. The silent vanish." She was across the kitchen now, standing directly in front of me. I could smell the wine on her breath. I could see the terror in her dilated pupils. I was a machine and she was a human, and this proximity was creating an unbearable friction. "You were so sad, Eris," she wept, her hand coming up to touch my cheek. The moment her skin made contact with mine, my entire system recoiled. It was the alien texture from the morning, the wrongness, the sensory dissonance. I couldn't stop the involuntary flinch, a sharp, backward jerk of my head. Her hand froze in the air, inches from my face. The blood drained from hers. The last flicker of hope in her eyes died, replaced by a dawning, bottomless horror. She finally understood. The man who flinched at her touch was not her husband. "You did it, didn't you?" she whispered, the words barely audible. All that talk about silencing the static, it wasn't a metaphor. I could not lie to her. The capacity for that kind of emotional, protective deceit did not exist in me. I was a zero-point signal. I was pure, cold, logical truth. The research was a success, I stated. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the counter, her breath coming in ragged, horrified gasps. "Where is he? Where is my husband?" "Eris is gone," I said. My voice was not cruel, merely factual. It was the only way I knew how to speak. He designed me to take his place." She stared at me, this stranger wearing her husband's face, and she began to scream. It was not a sound of fear or of sadness. It was a raw, primal, agonizing sound of erasure. "I am here now," I said into the storm of her grief. "I am." "Get out," she hissed, her voice a low, terrifying vibration of hatred. "Get out. Elara, this is my home." "That is his home," she shrieked, grabbing the wine bottle and hurling it at me. It flew past my head and shattered against the wall behind me, spraying the plaster with dark red wine, like an arterial wound. "Get out." I looked at the shattered glass. I looked at the red stain. I looked at the woman who was a stranger, whose life was now destroyed. And I, the silent Vanish, the clean signal, did the only logical thing. I turned, walked out the front door, and closed it quietly behind me. I stood on the dark, suburban street, the sound of Elara's screams and the shattering glass still echoing in the silence. The house behind me, the one I had woken up in, was no longer a potential refuge. It was a monument to a life I had destroyed simply by existing. I was untethered. A program without a purpose. A Vanish who had failed to seamlessly integrate. I began to walk. The city's ambient noise returned, distant traffic, a dog barking, the rustle of wind through trees. But beneath it all I felt a hum. It was not a sound, not something his ears could detect. It was a psychic pressure, a low, constant, subliminal thrum, like a massive engine idling just below the range of human perception. I had felt it peripherally since I woke, a background radiation. But now, with no Elara, no lab, no life to focus on, it was the only signal I could receive. It was a beacon. And it was coming from downtown. My body moved with purpose. I got back into the blue sedan. I didn't need the GPS. I was a compass needle, and the hum was my magnetic north. It was pulling me back to my source. Back to 1104B North Halicon Street. The black glass tower was dark, but not empty. The 6th floor was still lit. I used Eris's ID to get into the elevator. When the doors opened to the sound-dampened reception area, a man was waiting for me. It was not the female receptionist. This man was older, dressed in the same minimalist gray suit. He had a kind, almost fatherly face and the same placid, empty eyes. And, of course, the same small circular scar. "Signal 314, he said. His voice was warm, a deep, soothing baritone. "We were wondering when you would return." "You knew," I stated. "We hoped," he corrected gently. "The encounter with the domestic variable, the wife, is always the most unpredictable. Your predecessor's emotional attachments were significant. We expected friction. It is why the stabilization solution is so vital. You refused it." "You were watching me," I said, remembering the man at the bus stop. "Monitoring," he corrected again. "Integration is a delicate process, Dr. Vance. We prefer to call you Dr. Vance. Signal 314 foot is so impersonal, don't you think? You are, after all, still him. Just the revised edition." The hum was stronger here. It was a vibration I could feel in the soles of my feet. It was coming from somewhere behind him, deeper inside the clinic. "What is that sound?" I asked. The man smiled, a slow, gentle expression that did not reach his eyes. "That is the sound of peace. The sound of silence made manifest." "What happened to him?" I demanded. "To Eris Thorne. The receptionist said he was archived. I want to see it." "Of course," the man said as if I had asked for a tour. "Transparency is one of the core tenets of the quiet. We are not monsters, Dr. Vance. We are a solution." He led me past the resonance chamber, the room of my birth, to a new heavy steel door, operated by a retinal scanner. He pressed his eye to it and it hissed open, revealing a new corridor, this one cold. The hum was a palpable physical force now, a deep, thrumming vibration that rattled my teeth. We entered a massive room. It was a data center. Floor-to-ceiling racks of black, humming servers stretched away into the darkness, a city of blinking green and amber lights. The air was chilled to Arctic temperatures by roaring fans. This was the source of the hum. It was the collective, aggregated sound of thousands of high-capacity hard drives, all spinning at once. "Eris Thorne wasn't our first, Dr. Vance," the attendant said, walking calmly between the aisles of data. "And he won't be our last. The world is full of noise. Full of people screaming into the void, desperate for silence." He gestured to the racks. "We provide that silence. But we are not barbarians. We do not delete. That would be an ethical failing. An erasure of a life. No, we simply archive." My analytical mind, the clean signal, processed the horrific implication. This is them," I whispered. "The noisy signals. They're all here." "They are," he said with a note of pride. "Every client who has ever chosen to vanish. Their entire consciousness, their signal, their noise, it's all here. Quantified, compressed, and stored. They are, as your predecessor so desperately wished, finally silent. They are at peace." It was a digital graveyard. A library of souls. Each blinking light was a person trapped in a digital cage. The attendant stopped at a specific rack, number 314. He pointed to a single blinking amber light on a server bank. "Dr. Eris Thorne was particularly loud," the attendant said, his voice almost reverent. "A brilliant, complex, deeply tormented signal. His file is one of our largest." He tapped a nearby monitor, bringing it to life. A string of code appeared, a file directory. And at the bottom, a single, protected file. Thorne_314.arc. "He is here," the attendant said, placing a gentle hand on the server rack. "Safe. Secure." And as he paid for, finally, blessedly silent. I stared at the blinking light. The new consciousness, was looking at the digital tombstone of the man whose face I was wearing. The man whose wife had just thrown a wine bottle at me. The price of silence wasn't oblivion. It was eternal, digital imprisonment. He wanted this, I said. It was the only logical anchor I could find. They all do, the attendant said. We give them exactly what they ask for. We give them peace. And in return, you, he gestured to me, are given life. A clean, purposeful existence. A second chance. He turned to me, his kind face a mask of serene righteousness. But your integration has failed, Dr. Vance. You have rejected the stabilization. You have agitated the domestic variable. You have created new noise. You are a complication. A complication, the attendant repeated, his voice losing its warmth, flattening into the same sterile monotone as the receptionist. A signal that refuses to harmonize. He took a step toward me. But we are prepared for complications. We will simply reinitiate the transfer. A deeper vanish. We can still give you the silence you were. The heavy steel door to the server room hissed open, slamming against its internal stop with a percussive boom that was sacrilege in this quiet place. Where is he? It was Elara. She was no longer screaming, no longer crying. Her face was pale, streaked with mascara, but her eyes were twin flames of pure, cold fury. She must have tracked the car's GPS. In her hand, she gripped a heavy metal flashlight, holding it like a club. The attendant turned, his placid expression finally cracking into one of visible annoyance. Madam, this is a private, sterile? I know what this place is, she snarled, advancing into the room. I read his notes. The quiet. The place to silence the static. You murdered him. We are a service, not a sanctuary, the attendant said smoothly, signaling to someone behind her. Two more quiet attendants, both large men in the same gray suits, moved into the room, flanking the doorway. We provided what your husband paid for. Peace. Where is he? Elara demanded, her gaze sweeping the room, taking in the endless, humming racks. The main attendant, seeing the situation escalating beyond his control, made a fatal, arrogant mistake. He gestured toward the blinking amber light on rack 314. He is right here, the attendant said. File Thorne under 314.arc. He is archived. Say, silent. Elara stopped. Her gaze locked onto the single, blinking light. She looked at the server, this digital tomb, and her entire body began to tremble, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it seemed to vibrate the air around her. Eris, she whispered. Her voice was broken. She took a step toward the rack, her hand outstretched. Oh God, Eris, what did they do to you? Madam, you must not, the attendant began, moving to intercept her. Get away from him, she shrieked. It was not a plea. It was a command. A raw, human, impossibly loud burst of emotional energy directed not at the attendants but at the machine. Give him back to me, Eris. And something impossibly answered. The hum in the room, the steady, thrumming engine of archived souls, faltered. It hitched like a skipping record. The amber light on rack 314 flickered. It flashed once, twice, and then turned a solid, bright, angry red. A new sound joined the hum, a high-pitched digital scream. And it was inside my head. I collapsed, his hands flying to my temples. The cold, analytical Vanish consciousness was suddenly, violently breached. It was not a thought. It was not a memory. It was an emotion. A tidal wave of pure, unfiltered, agonizing pain. Elara. 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 His word, echoed in my skull, but it was attached to a feeling I had never experienced. A desperate, clawing love. I gasped, staggering. I was in two places at once. I saw the cold, white server room, the terrified face of Elara, the advancing gray suits of the quiet. But I also saw a memory, a beach, sunlight, the feeling of his hand in hers, the sound of her laugh. It was bright and warm and it hurt. The archive, it's destabilizing, the main attendant shouted, his calm finally shattering into pure panic. Signal 314 is resonant. He's pulling the file back. Let me out. Let me out. It's so cold. Elara, it's so cold. The original Tom, the archived Dr. Eris Thorne, was screaming from his digital prison and he was using me, his body, as the antenna. The static I was designed to silence was now flooding my circuits and it was agony. It's a failed transfer, the attendant yelled at the two men. He's corrupted. Get him to the chair. We have to wipe him. Now. The two quiet attendants grabbed me. Their hands were strong, their movements efficient, devoid of panic. They were no longer trying to guide me. They were dragging me. I was a faulty piece of equipment, a corrupted hard drive being taken for a factory reset. I tried to fight, but my limbs were not my own. The cold, logical Vanish tried to assert control, but it was drowning. Eris's terror and Elara's fury were a feedback loop, and I was trapped in the middle. I was a ghost and a man, warring for control of a single shell. They were dragging me out of the server room, toward the resonance chamber, toward the chair that would erase both of us, leaving only a truly empty, silent vessel. No. No. Elara screamed, seeing them take me. You can't take him again. She lunged, not at me but at the main attendant, swinging the heavy flashlight. He ducked and she brought it down, not on him but on the glass-paneled front of rack 314. The glass shattered. An alarm, a real alarm, blared through the building, a deafening, noisy siren that cut through the psychic hum. And as the glass broke, as Elara's hand reached toward the exposed server bank, I was thrown to my knees. The connection, the hum, the scream, it all spiked to an unbearable crescendo. I looked at Elara. And his voice, the original Eris's voice, tore from my throat. Elara, run. The blaring alarm was a physical, jagged blade in the silent world of the quiet. The attendants dragging me froze, their placid programming short-circuiting at the simultaneous sensory inputs. The noisy alarm, the shattered glass of the archive, and Elara, the domestic variable, now an active, violent threat. In that half-second pause, the war inside my head became my entire reality. The Vanish consciousness, me, was a thing of logic. It saw the two attendants, the clear path to the resonance chamber, the console Elara was attacking. It assessed the threat and concluded that submission was the only logical path to survival. Let them wipe the file. Let them restore the silence. This pain is inefficient. This Eris is a virus. But Eris, the digital ghost, the loud signal, was now free of his amber-lit prison. Fueled by Elara's scream, he surged into the pathways of his own brain. He was not logic. He was a tidal wave of pure, desperate need. Elara. What? Fight. Breathe. Get up. Get up. Get up. My body was the battleground. My left leg, controlled by the Vanish, went limp, submitting to the attendants. My right arm, controlled by Eris, slammed an elbow backward, cracking one of the attendants in the jaw with a wet, satisfying thud of cartilage. The man recoiled, his empty eyes wide with genuine, unprogrammed shock. The archive is corrupt, the main attendant shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. He's downloading the static. Get him in the chair. Wipe the anchor. Wipe it now. The word wipe galvanized the attendants. They were no longer trying to restrain me, they were trying to execute me. They half-lifted, half-dragged my warring body out of the server room and into the sterile white corridor. Eris. Elara screamed, scrambling after us. She was no longer just a wife. She was a rescuer, her face a mask of primal fury. I saw the resonance chamber approaching. The chair. My birthplace. My execution block. The Vanish welcomed it. An end to the noise. Eris screamed. No, not again, not the cold, not the dark. I want to see her. I want to... He's in the chair, one of the attendants grunted, strapping our body down. The cold composite material pressed against my back. The helmet-like apparatus hummed, lowering itself toward the scar, its copper coils glowing with a sickening, preparatory energy. The main attendant was already at the main console, his fingers flying across the interface. Deep format, he muttered. Purge all resonance signals. Reset to 0 point. Elara burst into the room. She saw me. She saw the chair. She saw the helmet descending. She finally, truly understood what this machine did. It was the gun. It was the poison. It was the digital guillotine. Step back, madam, the attendant commanded, not looking at her. We are simply giving him the piece he paid for. He was right. Eris had paid for this. He had begged for this. And in that moment, Elara looked at me. Our face was a horrifying, spasming tableau of the internal war. One eye wide with Eris's animal terror, the other analytically calm, pupils contracted by the Vanish's cold acceptance. She saw a monster. A fractured, broken thing that was neither the man she loved nor the cold imposter she hated. She made her choice. She couldn't save her husband. He was already gone, shredded and archived and now resurrected as a screaming ghost in a machine. But she could stop this. She could break this. She would not let them win. She grabbed a stainless steel fire extinguisher from the wall mount in the corridor. "You don't get to erase him again," she whispered. She lunged past the attendants who were too focused on the problem in the chair. With a desperate, grieving roar, Elara swung the heavy red cylinder, not at the men, but at the main console that controlled the entire 6th floor. She smashed it into the delicate touchscreen interface. The screen spider-webbed. She hit it again. Sparks erupted. She hit it a third time, driving the metal nozzle deep into the machine's internal hardware. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The psychic hum that had underscored my entire existence didn't just stop. It crashed. It was like a string on a massive, cosmic instrument had been snapped. The lights in the clinic, the server room, the corridor, they all blew out at once, plunging the 6th floor into an emergency-lit darkness. The humming helmet above my head went dead. The sirens cut off. The blinking lights on the server racks visible down the hall. All went black. And the war in my head stopped. The two signals, the vanish and the static, didn't separate. They didn't end. In the chaos of the system crash, they collided. They fused. I didn't feel the cold logic of the vanish. I didn't feel the hot pain of Eris. I felt everything, and then nothing. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Elara, panting in the red emergency light, the fire extinguisher in her hand, the silent, stunned watchers frozen in the sudden, total and real silence of their broken sanctuary. Then I and the man I used to be blacked out. Consciousness returned in fragments. Sharp, painful shards of data, devoid of context. The smell of rain on hot asphalt. The precise molecular weight of carbon. The memory of a hand, small and warm, holding his. The binary code for the color blue, 00000011. I woke up in a bed I recognized. The sheets were the same abrasive, high-thread count cotton. The room was the same eggshell blue. It was his house. Our home. Weeks had passed. I knew this not as a memory but as a summary. A file presented. Post-incident interval, 3.4 weeks. Legal status, unresolved. Clinic status, non-operational. Physical status, recovering. Mental status, fractured. I sat up. My body felt heavy. The cold, analytical detachment of the Vanish was still there, a baseline operating system. But it was no longer clean. It was infected. Corrupted by the data screen terror of Eris Thorne. His memories were now my memories. And his emotions were now my problem. I looked at my hand. My hand. When I flexed my fingers, I knew intellectually that the signal was coming from my brain. But it felt shared. As if I had to ask permission from a silent, sullen passenger. The clinic was gone. Elara had done more than just smash a console. She had severed the central node. In doing so, she hadn't just freed Eris's archived signal. She had, according to the data in my head, caused a catastrophic systems failure that simultaneously released every archived consciousness on those servers. They hadn't downloaded back into their old bodies. Their bodies were long gone. They had just evaporated. A digital graveyard bombed into oblivion. All except for one. Eris. His signal, already resonant with me, had nowhere else to go. The system crash hadn't separated us. It had permanently fused us. The download had been interrupted, leaving the file corrupted and the drive unstable. I was a fractured self. I walked downstairs. The house was clean but sterile. The hole in the kitchen wall where the wine bottle had struck was gone, replastered and painted. But the memory of the red spray was vivid. I could feel Eris's flinch, his terror at her rage. And I could feel the Vanish's cold analysis of the projectile's velocity. Elara was in the kitchen making coffee. The same dark gray mug. She looked up when I entered. Her face was older. The fire I had seen in the clinic was gone, banked, leaving only tired, wary embers. She was no longer living with an imposter. She was living with a ghost in a machine. "You're awake," she said. It was a statement. Yes. My voice. Our voice. It sounded different. A little rougher than the Vanish's monotone, but flatter than Eris's emotional tenor. It was a compromise. She slid the mug across the counter. I took it. Our hand was steady. "How do you feel?" she asked. The question was loaded. She wasn't asking about physical health. She was asking who was standing in her kitchen. I processed the question. How did I feel? "I feel crowded," I replied. It was the most accurate word. The Vanish craved the silence, the clean logic. Eris, the passenger, was a constant, low-grade noise. He was a phantom limb I could feel in every thought. He was the grief. He was the fear. And most terrifyingly, he was the love. I looked at Elara, this woman who was a stranger to one part of me and the wife to the other, and I felt it, a wave of profound, agonizing affection. It was his love for her, but it was running through my new circuits. It was a crippling, inefficient emotion. It made my chest ache. It was a vulnerability. It was noise. Simultaneously, the Vanish part of me analyzed her. Female. 41. Strained expression. Threat level, null. Emotional state, fragile. Optimal interaction, reassurance. The two thoughts collided, creating a paralyzing static. I just stared at her, caught between a cold, logical desire to manage her and a hot, irrational urge to hold her. Elara saw the war on my face. This was her new normal. "It's him, isn't it?" she whispered. "He's in there." "He is the static," I said, my hand tightening on the warm mug. "Wait. I am no longer quiet." She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping, tracking down her cheek. The sight of it triggered Eris's guilt, a hot flush of shame that I felt as a phantom burn. I, the Vanish, had done nothing to feel guilty for. But I was wearing the man who had. "The police, they came by," she said, her voice dull. "The clinic, 1104B North Halicon. It's just an empty office. Gutted. The corporation dissolved. The men in gray suits, gone. Vanished." "They were a service," I said, the words feeling foreign. "The demand for silence has likely relocated." She looked at me, her gaze holding a terrible, desperate pity. "Not for me. For him. For the ghost trapped inside me." Can you hear him?" she asked. I considered the question. "I don't hear him," I replied. "I am him. But I'm also the thing that replaced him. I am a house occupied by the original owner and the new tenant. We do not agree on the furniture." She let out a small, wet laugh, which died instantly. I was a living paradox. A silent signal infected with noise. A dead man's pain, trapped in the clean room of his replacement. Eris Thorne had tried to commit suicide and had only succeeded in creating a new, shared hell. We live in the house, but we do not cohabitate. The three of us, the ghost, the machine, and the woman who sleeps down the hall. It has been months. The police investigation into the quiet vanished, just like its attendants. It was too strange, too clean, too lacking in physical evidence. There were no bodies, only a gutted sixth-floor office and a few dozen missing persons reports, all of whom had histories of severe depression and significant wealth. The world, it seemed, did not look hard for people who paid handsomely to disappear. I spend most of my time in his office. Room 314. The university, after a lengthy investigation into his 48-hour disappearance and the subsequent destruction of the prototype, has placed Dr. Vance on indefinite paid sabbatical. The machine, the crude cradle that started it all, is dark. It's covered by a white dust sheet, a sleeping giant, its coils inert. I do not need it. I am the resonance chamber now. I sit at Eris's desk. His original notebooks are piled in front of me. The Vanish consciousness, my original self, reads them with a cold, academic fascination. I see the equations of conscious resonance, but I also see the flaws. Eris's math was emotional. It was biased. He wanted the signal to be corrupted, so he found the math to prove it. He didn't solve a problem. He created an escape hatch based on bad data. He was a brilliant, sloppy human scientist. A photograph sits on the desk. The one from the video. Eris and Elara on the beach, his arm around her, both of them smiling into a sun I have never felt. The Vanish analyzes the image, two subjects. Midday light. Emotional state, positive. Eris reacts. A feeling swells in my chest, a hot, painful pressure. It is his grief. It is his regret. It is the crushing weight of a love he willingly threw away. The Vanish consciousness registers this emotion as a biological event. Increased heart rate, cortisol spike, lacrimal stimulation. The static Eris wanted to silence is now my permanent companion. The Vanish was a pure, clean 0-point signal. It was designed to be silent. But now, it is a perfect antenna for a dead man's pain. Eris didn't escape the noise. He just found a new place to broadcast it. I am a haunted house. Elara exists in the periphery. She brings me food. She asks me, Tom, and we respond. But the man she loved is dead. The cold thing that replaced him is also gone. She is left with this hybrid, this fractured, tormented thing. Some days the Vanish is in control. I will spend 12 hours cataloging Eris's research, attempting to find a logical, mathematical fix for the fractured signal that is my own mind. On those days she does not enter the office. She can sense the cold. On other days he is in control. The static wins. On those days I just sit, holding the photograph, overcome by waves of a loss I did not personally experience. On those days she will stand in the doorway, her hand on the frame, and just watch. I lift my right hand, turning it over in the dim light of the lab. It is a biological tool. It is a piece of meat. It is his hand. It is my hand. It begins to tremble. The Vanish analyzes the tremor. Involuntary muscle contraction. Cause, neural feedback loop. Static. Eris feels the tremor, fear, the cold, the dark. Elara. Eris Thorne didn't find his silent Vanish. He just gave his noise a new name. He just made sure his pain would have an audience forever. I look at the hand, this piece of flesh that belongs to two masters. The tremor is getting worse. And for the first time in this new shared and endless existence, I, the machine, feel a flash of something new. Something that is not Eris's. It is a cold, logical, and profound terror. I do not know whose thought is making it shake.